Hi guys, today's lesson is going to be multiplying a whole number with a decimal number using the algorithm. I heard some of you guys were doing that yesterday, and that is not what yesterday's lesson was about. Yesterday's lesson was about modeling multiplying a whole number with a decimal. So like a picture of what it needs to look like, which is something that you have to know as a fifth grader. That is a math skill that you have to know, is being able to recognize a product on a decimal grid. So I hope that you did the assignment as you were supposed to yesterday, because that's what we would have done if I would have been there. Today is the actual algorithm and how to use it. You are going to kind of connect what you already know about multiplication of whole numbers to this, which is taking a whole number and multiplying it by a decimal. The process as far as the algorithm is pretty much the same, but the thing that's different is you're obviously going to have, oftentimes you're going to have a decimal as the product. And so you will have to know how many decimal places that you have in your factors that you're multiplying to figure out how many decimal places that your product or your answer is going to have. And this lesson today is going to kind of walk you through that process. So for example, in this problem, 2 and 89/100ths times 3, the first factor, 2 and 89/100ths, has 2 decimal places. And by decimal places, I mean decimal numbers to the right of the decimal. So they're in the decimal positions, like tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So you have the 8 that's in the tenths place and the 9 that's in the hundredths place. So that's 1, 2 decimal places. In the second factor, it's 3. It's a whole number. And as we've learned, whole numbers, we don't write whole numbers with a decimal unless we have to for an operation that we are using. So when it's out of sight, it's to the right. And so there is no decimal numbers or decimal places in a whole number. So there's just the 2 in the first factor. So the product of these two numbers would have 2 decimal places in the product because of that. So when we go to multiply the numbers using the algorithm, you would write the number with the most digits on top, because that's the way that we multiply using the algorithm. And you aren't going to bring down the decimal or anything like that you're used to with addition and subtraction. This is a whole different way of thinking. So like we said before, we will think about the decimal positions after we do the calculations. So first we're going to multiply the 3 times the 9, and that is 27. Then we're going to multiply 3 times 8, and that's 24 plus 2 is 26. And then last, we'll come over here and do 3 times 2, which is 6, plus 2 is 8. And then like we talked about before, we have 2 decimal places in our factors. And so there will be 2 decimal places in our answer. And so we start at the end and we move 2 places and place the decimal right here between the 8 and the 6. So the answer to the problem would be 8 and 67/100ths. Okay, so now get your guided practice. It's page 155, and we will do the guided practice together. So let's look at this first one right here. 9 8/10 times 2. So that's 2 groups of 9 8/10. So the first thing we're going to do is just multiply like normal. 8 times 2 is 16. Put your 1. Put your 6. Next, 2 times 9, that's 18, plus 1 is 19. Okay, so that's easy. Now we're going to go back and we're going to count the factors, or count the decimal numbers in each factor. The first factor is 9 8/10, because remember, a factor times a factor equals a product. So there is 1 decimal number in 9 8/10, and that's the 8. So that's 1. This is a whole number, and like we talked about before, there is no decimal places in a whole number because they're all zeros. So that doesn't do us any good. So that's 1 decimal place. So like we did before, we're going to start here after the 6, and we're going to move 1 decimal place, and then we're going to place our decimal between the 9 and the 6. And so our answer is 19 6/10. Okay, the second one is 67 hundredths times 8, which is the same thing as saying 8 groups of 67 hundredths. And so just like before, we're going to multiply the 8 times the 7, the 8 times the 6, and then the 8 times the 0. Notice the number with the most digits is on the top. That doesn't mean it's the greater number, it just means it's the longer number. So 7 times 8 is 56. 8 times 6 is 48, plus 5 is 53. And then 8 times 0 is 0, plus 5 is 5. So then let's look at our factors. We have the 67 hundredths, which has 1, 2 decimal places, the 6th and the 7th, or the tenths and the hundredths place. The 8, again, is a whole number. There's no decimal numbers there. So since there is 1, 2 decimal numbers or decimal positions, we're going to go 1, 2, and we're going to put our decimal right there. And our answer for that one is 5 36 hundredths. Okay, number 3, 34 times 5 3/10, or 34 groups of 5 3/10. So if you're doing some mental math or some estimating, you know that 5 3/10 is closer to 5 than it is 6. It's kind of like $5.30. So if you're going to estimate this product, I would estimate this to be about 30, this to be about 5, and 30 times 5 is 150. And so your product should be around 150. So you can use your mental math to estimate the products as well. Okay, so we don't multiply horizontally using the algorithm, so we will need to rewrite that vertically. So 34 times 5 3/10. So this is a 2-digit by 2-digit, so we'll need to multiply the 3 times the 4, the 3 times the 3. Then we'll put our 0 down here to hold our place because we're coming over here and that's really a 50. So 5 times 4 is, we'll do 20, and then 5 times 3 is 15. So this will be just like the algorithm on a 2-digit by 2-digit whole number. So 4 times 3 is 12. Put your 1 and then your 2. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 1 is 10. At this point, I'm done with the 3, done with the 1. I'm going to put my 0 down here as a placeholder. 5 times 4 is 20. Put your 2 and your 0. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 2 is 17. Then I'm going to add, and I'm going to get 1802. So let's look back up here at our factors. 34 is a whole number, so that does not have any decimal numbers. 5 3/10. Well, here's our decimal, and there's one number behind or to the right of the decimal. So since there is one decimal place in our factors, we're going to move one decimal place down here, and our decimal is going to be placed between the 0 and the 2. And so our answer is 180 2/10, which is around 150. So our estimate worked out well on that one. Next problem, 34 6/10 times 21, or 21 groups of 34 6/10. So if you're estimating, again, that would be, this is really close to 35, but I would probably estimate it to 30 because that's easier to do in my head. So 30 times about 20, that would be about 600. So just so you're keeping track there of what the product might look like. Go ahead and write your numbers vertically. And then we're going to, this is a 3 by 2. So we have to multiply the 1 times the 6, the 4, and the 3. And then move over here, multiply the 2 by the 6, the 4, and the 3. So 6 times 1 is 6. We don't have to carry any numbers there. 1 times 4 is 4, and 1 times 3 is 3. And that makes sense because basically you're saying 346 times 1, and that's 346. We are done with the 1. Oops. Done with the 1. We're going to move over to the 2, but before we do that, we need to put our 0 here as a placeholder, because now we're going to the 20, or 2 stands for 20, because it's in the tens place. So 2 times 6 is 12. Put your 2, carry your 1. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. And then 2 times 3 is 6. Add your partial products together. You have 6 and 6 and 12, carry your 1, and 7. So then you're going to come up here and look at your factors. 34 6/10, there's one decimal number, times 21 has no decimal numbers. So you have one decimal number, and we will move one decimal place right here in our answer. Place our decimal, and our answer is 726 6/10. If you remember, our estimate was about 600, so it's about 600. Okay, for number 5, I would probably, just because I like things to look nice, I'd probably put the 15 on the top. And I'm not going to put 0, 6, or 0 and 6/10 like that, because the 0 is basically, I mean, it's a 0, it's nothing. And so it'd be a lot easier, instead of doing this, to multiply it like this, 15 times 6. Okay, because we can always, and of course keep your decimal right here, we can always go back and look and make sure that those would be the same, but I'm telling you right now they will be, and it just makes more sense to set it up like this without the 0. And then so I'm going to go here and multiply the 6 times the 5, and that is 30. And then the 6 times the 1, that's 6, plus 3 is 9. Okay, we don't have a decimal place in our first factor of 15. We have one decimal place in our second factor because we have a 6 in the tenths place. So we are going to move the decimal once, put our decimal right here. And so we have 9 and 0/10. Well, that's the same thing as just saying 9, so we could just write it like that. And then our last example is 55 times 1 1/10, or 55 groups of 1 1/10. So that's going to be around 55, right? Because 55 times 1 is 55. Any number times 1 is itself. So So 55 times 1 1/10. 55 times 1 is 55, right? Okay, get rid of that one. Then we're going to come over here to this one, which is really a 10, so we're going to put the 0 there. But then we basically have 55 times 1 again, and 55 times 1 is 55. So add those up. 5, 0, carry 1, and 6. Come back up here, and 55 is your whole number, so no decimal places. 1 1/10. There's one decimal place right here. And so our answer will have one decimal place in it. So we're going to move it once. It's going to be between the 0 and the 5. So 60 and 5/10 is your answer, which is just a little bit above our estimate of 55. Okay, so just a couple of other instances that you might come across is like this 405 times 47 hundredths. Like we talked about before, the 0 really is not going to do anything here, because when you multiply 0 times anything, you're going to get 0. So really, I would prefer you to think of this as, or write that problem as 405 times 0.47 and just leave that 0 off. The same thing here. I would rewrite that 170 times 0.003. Okay, and no, you guys really, y'all don't know how to, I mean, you probably, some of you probably do, but in 5th grade, you don't have to know how to multiply a 3-digit by a 3-digit number. And so really, this is the same thing as 170 times 3, except for the fact that it has 3 decimal places in the one of the factors, so there'll be 3 decimal places in the product. So let me show you what that looks like. So 0 times 3 is 0. 3 times 7 is 21. And 3 times 1 is 3 plus 2 is 5. So since there's 3 decimal places in the original factor, you just have to keep that in mind and move your decimal 1, 2, 3. So it'd be right here. So your answer would be 510 thousandths. But you can see this is way easier to multiply or even look at than this is. So just a couple of things to keep in mind with the leading zeros that are for the whole number. You don't need to include those when you're multiplying. If they are trapped zeros, so they're like between the decimal and another number, you do need to include those when you're thinking about how many decimal places are going to be in your product, but not necessarily when you're doing the actual multiplication. You can just do the times the 3 and then go back and think about, oh yeah, I had 3 decimal places in the factor, so I need 3 decimal places in my answer. Okay guys, so now it's time for you to practice. I hope that you are understanding the algorithm today and how it kind of connects to what you've been doing when you multiply whole numbers times whole numbers. It's the same process. You just have to keep track of the decimal places in your factors so that you can put the decimal in the product, in the position that it needs to be. Okay, so work hard today. I will see you guys, or I won't see you guys, but I will have a lesson for you tomorrow and do what Mrs. Gerhart asked you to do. And I miss y'all. And hopefully I will see you soon. Bye.